Welcome to the Movement Leader Podcast, growing together as leaders.
Hey guys, we are so excited to be back for our second one. We made it, and you made it, and we're so happy. We hope you enjoyed the first one, and we are really excited about all the material that we're going to be putting out over the next couple months. So thank you so much for taking the time to invest in this way and just committing to learn more, because that's what we always want to be doing. We want to be growing and learning how to love our students better and learning how to work together. And so today specifically, we're going to be talking about the essential traits for youth leaders. We'll be talking about resilience, adaptability, and empathy. And so I am excited. So to begin, we are going to start out with a leader question. So how do I get out of my comfort zone? Micah?
Yeah, man.
How do we get out of there?
Yeah, I mean, we see this a lot, especially in newer youth leaders who are just stepping into youth ministry specifically, because it's a lot of different personalities, a lot of craziness at times. And so for new leaders, especially, how do you step out of your comfort zone? I think like it depends on your personality too.
Yeah.
I'm more of an introvert. I'm more of like, all right, I'm going to observe. I'm going to maybe be quiet at first and then step into it. So we always encourage our leaders to practice, to like step into a conversation that you might not feel equipped or comfortable with. And it might feel choppy. It might feel like you're not hitting all the marks, but that's okay. Yeah. The more you practice it, the more you're going to get comfortable with it, and seek out those opportunities too. Don't just sit in the shadows. Seek out uncomfortable situations, and you'll get better at them. Yeah,
that's always a big thing. I like it when we're like talking to a new youth leader and they're talking about potentially joining, and they bring up that fear that they have, like, what if I don't know an answer, or what if I am uncomfortable praying out loud, or anything like that. Like a student brings something to me. I like having those conversations because I love checking in on them, like months later or a year later, and hearing the growth that they've experienced, because with that practice does bring out just incredible things. I mean, great fruit within the students, relationships, and even confidence that the Lord can use you. He wants to use you when you make yourself available. And so getting out of your comfort zone, I think square one, talk to Jesus, ask the Holy Spirit to, one, give you opportunities, but two, to fill you with his Spirit and his different fruit and gifts that he wants to give you, because that is what's going to equip you. There have been so many times when I've been asked a question or brought a situation with a student, and it's like, oh gosh, I have no idea how to handle that. But through prayer and through in that moment, even just being like, okay, Jesus, like, download information into my head because I don't know what to do. And he does. He doesn't want to leave us hanging. And that just gives me courage then and taking deeper steps with the Holy Spirit and trusting him more when he calls me into waters that are very uncharted for me. So, I mean, ask Jesus, ask him for opportunities, ask him for his gifts, ask him for the different things, and that will definitely edify your spirit, but also bless the students and leaders around you.
Yeah, and be comfortable in your personality too.
Yeah, that's huge.
I think like one of the things that is cool about our dynamic is like Mary is very extroverted and like big personality, and I'm not that way. And sometimes we can feel uncomfortable with that, especially in youth ministry. Sometimes you feel like you have to be that the wild, crazy, big, outspoken personality. We need people who can just sit too and be a steady presence. And so operating in your giftings, your personality too, and being comfortable with that helps a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, should we get into it? The
it.
first traits that all youth leaders need is resilience. Ministry is hard. Yeah. Youth ministry specifically is hard. Yeah. And so to be able to be in frustrating situations or feel like you are not doing what you need to do to feel like you're not equipped. What do you do to bounce back from those situations where you feel like maybe you're failing or you're not enough? Yeah. What do you do to come back from that?
Yeah. I know specifically, in this season exactly, I kind of was excited to talk about this topic specifically because I was just talking to a good friend about this feeling, and I'm sure I yap. So I was talking to several good friends, but about my feelings towards this exact emotion of like, am I still relevant? Am I still doing things that, mean something to students? Am I supposed to still be in this, being this pregnant as I am and uncomfortable, and like my clothes aren't fitting and my shoes aren't fitting and I don't feel cool and I feel like just a slob. Like I genuinely was like having a crisis of, am I even relevant? Am I even able to speak into these students' lives? I was struggling so much. And there's so many things that I was doing that validated that emotion and validated that insecurity that was just getting me into a headspace that was so unhealthy and so unproductive and made even going to youth way more difficult. Like getting ready, going to youth and walking in the doors, I felt insecure. Teaching, I felt insecure. In small groups, I felt nervous. And talking to students, even when they were talking to me about like validating me, even I was just nervous and insecure. And so there were things I was doing, like focusing on the negative or the thoughts in my head that never came from Jesus, never even directly came from a person, but came from me, and that I was whipping up. And so it's like, well, my clothes aren't the same, and my shoes, I can only wear certain shoes right now. And it's like, I'm not relevant. I'm not cool. They're not looking at me like I'm cool. But the reality is they don't love me because I'm cool. Like they love me because I've invested in them and I've spent time with them. And so instead of focusing on the, what if I'm not relevant? What if I'm not cool? I shifted my focus a lot to like, they love me because I have loved them and I've invested in them, and they need an adult to do that. And that's what students want, and they trust that.
Yeah.
And then also allowing little wins to be big wins, like little things where we were talking about, a student reached out to me recently and they were like, hey, I just was thinking about you and I'm grateful for you. And thank you so much for being a part of my life. And I was like, oh, that was sweet. I wonder why she said that. And like my brain like immediately went to like, I wonder if she thinks I'm struggling, or like, you know what I mean? Like, like I wonder why she
Back
even
to
said that.
insecurity.
Yes, back immediately.
Yeah.
Like instead of taking that as like, I'm going to allow that to bless my heart and allow that to encourage me, I immediately went to insecurity. And so it's just like that feeling of you have to be in charge of where you allow your brain to go. Like you have to be accountable to where you allow your brain to take you. And so just, taking on that accountability and redirecting your thoughts immediately. And even if it's like if you're visual, like picturing a stop sign in your head and being like, no, like I'm not going to like take captive of your thoughts and allow yourself to take on those wins and those victories of students loving you and appreciating you and being grateful for you. And so, yeah.
Because the reality is there are so many things that can go into frustration in ministry or feeling like you're at that low point as a leader. And so it's easy for us to get tunnel vision and be like, I'm only focused on like what I'm feeling right now. But once we open up our perspective, because there are things like leadership changes that happen in ministry. You might have a new leader in your small group who adds a different dynamic. And so that can change how you feel about the flow of the night or the flow of your small group. There's, feeling like you're not equipped, like you're not relevant, like you said, like you're not enough. Maybe you're just lacking energy.
Right.
Like winter's hard. Like we've been talking about, like the sun's starting to come out and it's like, what is this?
Right.
What is this bright day we're having? And so like those cloudy days. And so there are so many things that go into, what you can be feeling. And so for us to get a bigger perspective, sometimes we do just need to hit that pause button and be like, okay, why am I actually feeling this way? And like you said, like seeking the Lord is the first thing that we need to do. Stepping in and saying, Lord, like who am I? Like coming back to our identity in Christ. Like no matter what is going on around me, like I am a child of God. Like first and foremost, that's who I am. Seeking professional counseling is super helpful. That's something that both of us do. And that's something that we often tell leaders, like if you're in a spot where you feel like you're just going through like this cycle of just darkness, professional counseling is incredible to just process those things. Like you said, keeping track of your wins. It's easy when you're like in those seasons to only see the negative. And so for us to be like, no, like God is doing incredible things like in our ministry, in our small groups. He's using us, even if we don't feel that way. The reality is students don't know how to give positive feedback in the best way. High schoolers more so, they can do that. Like they've developed that like encouragement. Middle school leaders, you got it tough. Like like rarely a middle schooler is gonna come up to you and be like, you're doing a great job.
Thank you so much. That's rare.
That's rare. And so if you're seeking validation from your students, like sometimes that's 100%. Not gonna happen. Looking for validation first and foremost from God, but also talk about it, like get a different perspective. Yeah,
and that's huge. Just reminding yourself of who you are in Jesus and the things. We had a conversation with a couple leaders yesterday where just the reminder, I mean, it was a good reminder for me, but also for them to remember, when you leave and you feel like, am I even making an impact? And you're looking back at like the night, or you're looking back at a conversation, or you're looking back at a situation that's not getting better as quickly as you would want it to, you are called to show up and to love students. That's what you're asked to do. And if you're doing that, we have to let God handle the rest and just trust him with it. And so giving it over to him, allowing him to take the seed and make it something amazing. I mean, that's difficult because we can, keep track so specifically and be like, this situation's not getting better, or they're not responding, or they're not opening up, and they're not going deeper. You don't know what's going on internally, and you don't know God, or you don't know how God's using that to move them forward and bring them closer to him.
Yeah.
And so trust God, trust his timing.
100%. Yeah. It is a process, and students are all over the map on that, where they're at in that process. And we can't take the full weight of their discipleship on us.
No.
Yeah. Trusting God in it. So resilience, adaptability is our second trait. Adaptability is huge in youth ministry.
Yeah.
One of our friends, Kenny Burcham, always said, we make our plans and God laughs.
We plan, God laughs.
Yeah.
We plan, God laughs. He'd say it for everything.
So a lot of Mary and I's job is planning out a night, planning out what the calendar looks like for the year. And if you've been around for a minute, you know that it is constantly changing. There are things that happen that cause our plans to change. And one of the things that we see Jesus do over and over again in Scripture is he has a plan. He has an ultimate goal. He's not careless or reckless in his mission, but oftentimes on that path to carry out that mission, people interrupt him.
Right.
Things happen.
Right.
And Jesus doesn't see those things as interruptions. He sees them as opportunities. And so for us in ministry, like, we have to be able to change and adapt and to see what God is doing, even if it's not what we planned.
Right.
We see leadership changes happen. We see vision changes happen. Life happens. There's a night when it just seems like everybody's sick, or somebody drops out last minute and we need to have somebody fill in. So things like that happen. We realized in a moment that our plans weren't the best plans.
That game was a real stinker. We got to call the
We
shot
gotta roll
here.
with it. Not going as planned.
No.
But plans do change. And so we can either let that distract us and really just tear us down for the whole night, or we can roll with it and see what God wants to do with it. So, Mary, how have you seen like adaptability play into your leadership? How you've been able to maybe maybe speak towards like when you've had a hard time with it, but also how has it shaped like how you've led?
I think being adaptable, even if people say like, I'm really good at rolling with the punches, you can only be so good at that naturally. Naturally, we want things to go as planned. We plan things out. And if you pour time into it, that's where I've struggled. It's like, I have poured time into this and I've thought of this and I was intentional about my thinking. And then when something happens or shifts last minute, it's like difficult sometimes to shift your focus and on the bigger picture. And so in any case, we had talked about it a little bit yesterday, talking about events specifically. I will think of every single little detail of like, how could this go wrong? How could we fix this problem? Every single detail is planned out in my head and on paper and communicated to everyone. And then somehow, some way, something I didn't think of, pops up and changes the whole deal, changes the plan. And that can, be really discouraging. And in that moment, it can shut you down and it can be like, well, what are we going to do? Like, what am I going to do about this? This is not like, I can't do anything. And so it can shut you down or discourage you or make it feel like the whole situation was a watch, or you can allow it to grow you and you can allow yourself to stop and be like, all right, this can be a good problem. I had a friend, her mom always used to say that. She'd go, this is a good problem. And that always drove me crazy because it was like, no, we're sleeping in a tent with a hole in it and it's raining. This is not a good problem.
Good. No.
Nothing good about it. Yeah. But her attitude shaped everyone around her's perspective. Yeah. And you see that in a leader. So if you're leading a group on a night and something's not going the way that you're hoping it's going, and your attitude is reflecting, this is the worst, I'm upset about the vision change, I'm upset about the shift, the students around you are going to feel that. Same goes for us as leaders. If we're presenting something to the leaders and we're mad about it or we have a bad attitude about it, everybody feels that, and that trickles right down. And so having the mind to be like Jesus and be like, all right, I'm just going to trust. I'm going to trust the leadership above me. I'm going to trust that they are influenced by Jesus, that they're seeking the Lord. And in that, I'm just going to trust him because, again, we can only do so much.
Yeah.
We plan, God, I mean, the thing is funny of like, we plan, God laughs, like, God's not really laughing at you. But we plan, and it's like, God's like, well, let me do it.
Yeah.
Let me carry this on. Let me carry this through. And so
you don't want to be careless and not plan.
No.
But you want to hold that with an open hand
Yes.
and say like, okay, here's our plans, God.
Yep.
Lead us in a way that like you
Yeah.
want us to go within like what we've planned.
Yeah.
I used to have, so when I first started ministry, I was leading a 7th grade group, and these guys were crazy. It was me and 21 7th grade dudes. Like I was the only leader. But I'd go into those times with this plan of like, this is going to be the deepest conversation we've ever had. Like I have the questions, I have it locked in. Like the lives are going to be changed in this small group time. And it never went that way. And I was always so frustrated with that. But as we talk with leaders now, it's like, man, yeah, plan out, like read the questions ahead of time, but also be open to like where that conversation needs to go. Because your students, we want you to talk about the questions, but at the same time, the students have things that they need to talk about. So be willing to like go with the flow. Obviously keeping it on track, but also like letting them like take the conversation where it needs to go.
Absolutely, because that's so important. That's huge for them. That is where relationships are forming. And so if they need to talk about Fortnite for 5 of the minutes, let them do that and then bring them back in.
Let them go crazy for a minute, bring them back in.
Yeah.
Because you're right, like it does reflect. So if you're under pressure and you're not rolling with where it's going, the students sense that and they feel that, and they're going to feel that too. They're going to feel frustrated. They're going to feel like, well, this seems chaotic.
Right.
Or you can roll with it and lead them in a direction of, okay, like we're going with this. And make it exciting and make it fun. And like you said, viewing challenges as a opportunity rather than a threat. Like we have this opportunity to make something great, even though it's not what we planned. And lead other students into that. And for our leaders too, like our leaders, you guys are incredible at rolling with a game, and we're like, we need somebody to clean up this mess that was just created by this game. We didn't plan for that. And our leaders just jump in and start cleaning up. And
all of a sudden I see someone coming in the back with a mop, and I'm like,
we forgot that detail, but you guys have it covered. And so
forgot the eggs are messy. Totally forgot about that.
Yes. Adaptability, our second one, our last one that we want to talk about, and this is a huge one, relationally especially, is empathy. Stepping into other people's shoes. That's what empathy means. And so for us in ministry and for you guys as leaders, this is our greatest call, to see where other people are at. The reality is students can be frustrating. They can be annoying. How we perceive them makes all the difference in the next steps that they're going to take. I had a youth pastor mentor once tell me a kid's greatest annoyance could be their greatest gifting. So I think about like kids that I've seen who were the most disruptive in small groups. I was initially really annoyed with them until I heard this, and I was like, maybe they could actually be great communicators. Right now, it's super annoying. They use their voice in the wrong way. They're using their voice to lead others astray. What if we viewed them as, man, they can be a great communicator. They can be somebody who leads other people in a great direction and lean into that. So Mary, what are some ways that you've developed empathy in your own life? I think it's something that comes more natural to other people, maybe not to other people. I've seen leaders who are just like, you need to figure this out. You need to get this done. I don't care what you're going through. Like, this is the right way to do it. Which is like, I'm not bashing that. I think that like we've developed that too. Like we have
time and
our
place.
Own past. And so how have you developed empathy in your leadership?
This is a difficult thing. I do think that some people are naturally like, they just wear the emotions of other people. When someone comes to them with a big issue, they feel it deeply. And this isn't something where we could even have conversation in the other way of like, feel less of that. You know what I mean? Really trust Jesus to carry those things. But for the leaders who sometimes struggle with that, who see things as disruptions and get frustrated with the disruption of maybe a kid who communicates differently or more, or even is constantly, this is something that I sometimes struggle with, is constantly coming to me with the same problem, and I give them the same advice over and over. Yet the next week, they're still just as emotional talking about the same problem. And I can easily get into my head of like, I can't have this conversation with you anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I have given you the tools. I've given you all I can, yet you are still continuously coming back crying about the same thing. And that sounds so harsh, but I'm sure some of you have felt that way. And if not, it's all right. Just,
Yeah.
I'm not hateful. It's just something I
Yeah.
struggle with. No, but that can be an easy thing to think of
Yeah.
too, of like, okay, well, I can't even deal with this anymore.
Yeah. It feels like you're going in a loop too.
Yeah,
Like,
in a loop. And
you're
there
coming back
is
to it.
time and space for being real with them and being like,
Mhm.
okay, like I got to give you hard truth here. But in that space, try so hard not to view them as an obstacle or
Yeah,
even just like
yeah.
blow past them,
Mhm.
because this is the moment of their week that they have been thinking of while they're struggling to focus in on all the advice that they're given, all of the difficult things that they're walking through. They're thinking of, I get to talk to my leader on Sunday night. This 20-minute conversation that you can have with that student may feel annoying and draining to you in that moment, because it's like, we did this last week,
Yeah.
but they're coming to you for a reason. They're coming back to you for a reason because they see Jesus in you. They feel better after they leave your presence. And so sacrifice that 20 minutes. It is worth it. It is so worth it. And then eventually, I promise you, it'll sink in. It'll sink in. And if they don't take your advice, they don't take your advice. And
Yeah.
that's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. Don't walk away and carry that weight. But just take the time. You're here anyways. That's the biggest thing, is you're here for this 2-hour chunk on Sunday nights. And you might as well just capitalize on it completely and utilize soak up every single minute of that 2 hours. I hope that we all leave tired on Sunday nights from loving kids really well. It's just, if you're going to sacrifice that time, sacrifice it fully, and invest your heart emotionally and love them really, really well, which can be really hard. And so I don't want to downplay it, but if you're going to do it, I mean, do it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I just want to circle back to one thing you said at the beginning with leaders who are naturally more empathetic, and they can tend to carry that weight on themselves.
Yeah.
I've had to learn this, and one of my mentors told me, like, everybody else's crisis is not your crisis.
Right.
So we can be empathetic, we can carry the weight for other people, but
Right.
it's not your responsibility to fix it. And you don't have to carry that weight, nor should you.
Right.
You can walk alongside people, you can step into their story, but you don't have to feel that weight all the time. One of the things I always tell leaders is to get curious. If a kid is acting out, they're not behaving in a way that's honoring, get curious about, what was your week like? Have a conversation with that student. Don't just take it at face value. Like, have that wondering question. Okay, so they're acting this way. I wonder why. Like, I wonder what happened this week. I wonder what happened today. I wonder what's going on in their life. And oftentimes that gives us just a little more perspective of what they're going through.
Right.
The second thing I wrote down was get relational, ask questions about their story,
Yeah.
Get to know what's going on in their life. I had a student on Sunday night who was just having a hard time. Like, you could see it, you can see it on students' faces. They don't hide it very well.
No.
But they're just having a tough week. And I was like, what's going on, man? Are you okay? He's
Yeah.
like, I'm fine. I was like, okay, no, but what's really going on?
Yeah.
And like, he just went into like what's been going on in his life in the last
Yeah.
year, and it was super,
It's a lot.
super sad.
Yeah.
But also, like, he keeps showing up,
Yeah.
and he keeps searching for that truth that we carry. And I think about, like, Jesus when Lazarus died, like that story about Lazarus dying, like Jesus' best friend, and Jesus goes to the tomb, and like everybody there is crying and weeping, and Jesus weeps with them.
Yeah.
He wasn't weeping. He knew he was going to raise Lazarus
Right,
from the dead.
right.
Like,
He
he
knew
knew
the
that,
outcome.
but he was weeping with those people who were also feeling the weight of Lazarus' death. And like, we get the opportunity to do that, to step into students' stories and be like, man, that is really hard.
Right.
But also calling them to the next level too.
Right.
Like, you can use that relational equity that you build. I think when you keep showing up and you keep asking questions, you stay curious, like, you are invested in their life. These students are going to see you as somebody who can speak life into them, and you can tell them, like, hey, I see this in you. And if this behavior continues, it might lead you in this direction in 1 to 5 years.
Right.
But if you channel this into the positive,
Yeah.
like, you could be an incredible leader and like keep speaking life into their situations.
Yeah.
And it might not change overnight. We come back to what we started out with of like, this is a process.
Right.
Students are, 2 steps forward, 1 step back often.
Yeah.
We have to be showing up for that 1 step back.
Yep.
And that 1 step back is a critical moment in their life.
Yeah.
Where we can say, man, there is another 2 steps forward.
Yeah.
Like, you are not stuck in this. Let's
Yeah.
keep moving forward.
Yeah. And I think that there's so much merit to just having an adult give a rip about a kid.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
100%.
You would be so surprised about how many kids do not have an adult that cares about them. in the way that they should, and just genuinely cares or believes in them or believes they could be great. And so feeling the weight of that on that night of like, I'm going to be the adult that gives a crap about you.
Yeah.
I'm going to care about you, and I'm going to love you and walk with you in in what you're walking in now, and be patient with you and lead you the way that Jesus is patient and leads me, because I know that Jesus has to look at us sometimes like that too, of like, I've given you the same advice, or I've shown you this way, or I've, we're 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 10 steps back with Jesus sometimes. And he's so patient with us. And so allowing our brains to get to a space where we can have that same view of students is so good. I mean, that's such a good, I love that.
Yeah.
It's so great.
So resilience, adaptability, and empathy. Three major characteristics that we want to see in leaders that we are working on as leaders as well. And my question for you guys would be, which one's the most challenging? Which one's the most challenging that you need to lean into right now? Because the reality is, like, we can always look at areas that we need to improve on as leaders. Yeah. But focusing in on like, hey, what's the one thing I want to focus on in this season, developing more in my leadership. So that is the episode number 2.
There we go.
Incredible. Thank you guys for joining us. We will see you on episode 3.